Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Mike Block, and in this counseling brief, we are going to look at personality and why it is important to understand and utilize personality measures. There are many good personality instruments out there, including the Myers-Briggs, but the Big Five is the most widely accepted, and this is based on social science community consensus and many empirical studies that are out there. So we're going to dive right into the Big Five personality traits and look at each of these five factors, including the characteristics associated with each domain. A good way to remember this acronym is OCEAN, OCEAN. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These traits can also be found, or themes can also be found in the Myers-Briggs, with the exception of neuroticism. So these aren't mutually exclusive of the Big Five. Keep in mind that each of these traits are not black and white, but rather placed on continuums. It's unlikely that you would find somebody solely possessing one polarized trait, for example. With that in mind, let's jump into the first one, and that is openness. If you are high in openness when compared to other people, you are more inventive, you're more curious, full of ideas, you have a great appreciation for art, emotion, imagination, and probably are highly creative. And this may sound like a great thing, and it is a great thing, but there are also downsides that make you more susceptible to risk taking, indecisiveness, maybe being a little more unpredictable in behaviors. Oftentimes, experimenting with drug or alcohol, that can be a downfall. If you are low in openness, you are not interested in abstractions. You tend to be much more grounded and practical and more conventional in your thinking. If you find yourself more polarized in one direction, you might want to take some intentional efforts to practice the opposite. If this is causing you some distress, that is. In other words, too much chaos is not good, neither is too much order. I would like to say you'd like to have one foot in order and one foot in chaos. The second trait we're going to talk about is conscientiousness. This has more to do with self-discipline, striving for achievement, being very driven, following a schedule, conquering your list of things to do, and being exact in your work performance. In fact, the two most powerful predictors of life success is intelligence, which genetically we have no control over, and conscientiousness. So that combination correlates very well with career and life success. Now, at the opposite end of conscientiousness is spontaneity, flexibility, kind of a more laid back, laissez-faire attitude. So where would you place yourself on that continuum? Think about that, and we will go on to the third one, which is extroversion. Now, this is where you are highly social, you get energy off of other people. If you're extroverted, you're collaborative, you're enthusiastic, you're sometimes assertive, you're dominant in social settings often. On the opposite end of this scale, you have introversion, of course, which is less social. You avoid crowds and parties. Now, this does not necessarily equate to shyness or antisocial behavior, although it can, but this group tends to be much more reserved. Now, I'm fairly low on the extroversion scale, and this has caused me problems at times. Sometimes I have to force myself to be a little more social in situations. The fourth one is agreeableness. Now, this one is interesting to me. This trait aligns with empathy, having a soft heart, and being interested in how other people feel. Generally, they are also more optimistic. This describes a lot of people in the helping profession, if you think about it. Research has shown that agreeableness positively correlates with the quality of relationships that we have with others. On the flip side, you have disagreeableness. Here, you do not have a problem saying no. You have little empathy for others. However, you're much less likely to be taken advantage of. For those of you who are highly agreeable, it may be in your best interest to practice some degree of disagreeableness. Say no once in a while. As helpers, we have a tendency to overpromise, overcommit. A lot of times we put too much on our plate and we become burned out and much less effective. I've been there. I tend to be a very agreeable person, and I'm probably impacted by negative emotions more than the normal person. Empathy is a good thing, but sometimes it can be a curse if it is not managed. Over time, I've had to adjust. Now, fifth is neuroticism. Neuroticism is the tendency to experience negative emotions such as anxiety or depression. You might equate it to emotional instability and pessimism. People in this category tend to perceive the negativity in basic life events. Too much neuroticism can develop into psychological and physical problems, including depression. On the opposite side, individuals who score low in neuroticism are less easily upset. They're less emotionally reactive. They tend to be calm, emotionally stable, and free from persistent negative feelings. Now, if you are too low on this scale, calm and relaxed all the time, it does not necessarily equate to positive feelings. Sometimes we need, that little spark. So oftentimes negative emotions can motivate us to do positive things in order to overcome adversity. Remember, looking at all of these items, it's probably not in our best interest to be too polarized. Now, even though we likely cannot change our personality tendencies, we can overtly become aware and practice traits that may be somewhat a challenge for us. This is where I would like to have you look into the benefits of Gestalt theory, where it's common to practice the polarities or opposite of what you normally would do. Now, is there a difference between men and women? The answer to that is both yes and no. Research has shown that there are many more similarities than differences. However, at the extremes of the distribution, you see very large differences. For example, women tend to be slightly more agreeable than men. It's about 60-40, although there are certainly many disagreeable women and many agreeable men. When you look at the extremes of the bell curve, the very top percent of agreeable people are women, and the very top percent of disagreeable people are almost all men. This is probably why women tend to dominate the helping professions in large numbers. Also, because they tend to be a little higher on extroversion. If you look at our prison population, it's almost exclusively comprised of men or women who got caught up with the wrong man. You can see that with neuroticism as well. Women tend to be more susceptible to negative emotions, such as anxiety and depression, with the exception of anger and hostility, which would lean more toward the males. What I get out of all of this is that it's very helpful to be aware of my own traits and those of the people I'm helping. It helps me have a greater appreciation for someone's life position, and it can provide clues into ways that we can provide strategies that adhere to our strengths and compensate for our weaknesses. Now, there's been quite a few studies using the big five traits, so I'll leave it up to you to do some of your own research and look into the utility of understanding personality. I hope you got something out of this. Thanks for your time.